But it was a really, I think, interesting confrontation for me to do with myself of how much do I understand people based on their political beliefs, and is that legitimate? Can we ascribe morality to political belief in this kind of ecosystem that is so polarizing?
And can you disagree with a person's political beliefs but still care if they got a good night's sleep?
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Tyke.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Community Foundation in support of the Adirondack Community Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
And here I thought you were going to tell me a story about constellations as seen from Ives Park.
Nope, don't believe in constellations. I think the Earth is actually underwater. Do you know that's a conspiracy theory?
No, I was not aware of that.
I'm
learning so much from you today, Ethan.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here. That's why I produce the show. My brother works with a guy, who's not going to hear this because it's out in Arizona, who thinks that's...
Oh, I forgot that's right. We don't distribute this podcast in Arizona.
Crap.
Different time zone. They don't believe in daylight savings time.
Okay, based on what I'm going to tell you, he's not going to listen to the show. Okay, he doesn't think that space is real. He thinks that Earth is actually underwater, and we're just surrounded by a big dome of water, and space isn't real. Mm-hmm. So where are we? What are we floating in? This podcast coming to you from the Marianas Trench.
Actually, I don't believe that gravity is real. I think that everything in the solar system and in the universe is controlled by static electricity.
Do you have anything that can back that up?
How do you know that everything on the Earth has not somehow been rubbed?
Northwards after dark. Okay, so we're doing the intro here for this week's
thing
podcast.
On? Testing.
Hello, pushpin. We're doing the intro for this week's edition of the podcast. You're going on vacation, and so we are going to be introducing a couple conversations that you might have heard before.
Yes, these are conversations that you might have heard before.
Okay, there it is.
This is, in fact, the August edition of Northwards, the radio show, which, for those of you in Arizona who are not listening to this, is broadcast on the stations of North Country Public Radio across northern New York.
This week, you're featuring a conversation with Nina Kissinger, right?
Nina Kissinger, indeed.
I loved this. This is one of my favorite conversations that you've ever had. I think that
better than this one.
Definitely better than this one. Peeling back the curtain of a playwright or a writer or a filmmaker or a musician's process is really fascinating to me. Nina Kissinger is a young playwright who has used her experiences interning on Capitol Hill when we were still reeling from the January 6th insurrection. She was working there in the months afterward. COVID was still a thing, and she spent most of her time talking to people on the phone, constituents who would call like 6, 7, 8 times a day trying to reach their representative, and instead they got Nina or one of the other interns. And I thought it was really inspired and really brilliant that she turned those experiences into this play.
And I thought she was really introspective and just kind of a delight to chat with. For folks who are hearing this interview just as it comes out, the play was getting its world premiere at Pendragon Theater in Saranac Lake, but then so that this interview has legs, I'm sure this is the only reason why, it will go on to off-Broadway in New York City in September. So folks who might be listening to this in New York City or might be going to New York City or know someone that has once been to New York City or just likes to say New York City into a microphone, it'll still be out there, and hopefully, I mean, I think what's interesting, we talked about this last week on the podcast. It's I think a surprise to people who have not spent time on Capitol Hill. But for those of us who have, we're aware of this, that so much of the constituent work gets done by people who are pretty far removed from the representatives themselves, and that's interns or low-level staffers or whatever.
They're not making the decisions; they're just conveying the message.
And they're conveying the message and doing their best to empathize with the people who are on the phone or who are sending their emails or whatever.
And one of the interesting things that she says during the course of the interview is that part of her script is to try to get people off of the phone. Like, yes, they're answering the phone, they're taking the message, but a lot of these people like really need to have their message heard, need to get it to the elected representative. And she says that in a big bad way, it's kind of like a failing of the of government.
Yeah.
And to hear that from the inside was really enlightening, because I don't know anybody who's ever interned on Capitol Hill.
Aside from me.
Well, aside from
you know me.
Yeah. But you were writing the speeches.
Yes, that's true. And also I interned on Capitol Hill back in the days when I had hair, and anybody who knows me knows that it's been a while.
Have you ever attended a play on Broadway?
No, I have not.
You've never been to a Broadway play?
I mean, I've been to a Broadway-style play. I mean, I've been to Broadway.
What does that mean?
Well,
I've eaten at a Texas-style restaurant?
Yeah, exactly. You big galoot. No, I mean, I saw Les Mis at the Kennedy Center.
Oh, okay.
And I saw Cats at the National Theater in Washington, and but have I been to and I saw Hamilton in Chicago.
You work for NCPR. Of course you've seen Hamilton.
Well, yeah. In fact, I did the choreography for Hamilton, I'll have you know.
Yeah, you sometimes...
Oh, sorry, I did the choreography of walking from my seats to the bathroom at Hamilton.
That looked good, though.
It was
I've seen a couple of plays on Broadway. I went to see Aladdin, which was a lot of fun, and the performance that we saw actually had the voice actor from the film version playing Jafar on stage, which was a surprise. It was not conveyed to us in advance, so it was a surprise for the audience. And then I also saw a Broadway version of American Psycho, which was amazing. There was lots of blood. There was this really amazing musical act where the characters had guns filled with money, and they're just spraying the crowd with fake money. So anyway,
I saw Richard III in London, the Ian McKellen version, which was really amazing. Yes.
Oh my God.
In 1991.
So Ian McKellen was only 105 at that point.
It was this really revolutionary version of Richard III. It was kind of set in a modern day fascist state, and it was. It was really pretty amazing, and I don't remember much about most of the plays that I've seen, but Richard III, that version really stuck with me.
Should we get into the show?
Let's get into the show. This is the August edition of Northwards, the radio show. Enjoy. When I was a teenager, I worked a variety of part-time and temporary jobs. There was the time I assembled bed frames at a hotel that was under construction. I once worked for 2 days selling hot dogs, no kidding, inside a department store. And there was the time I worked on a presidential campaign. I was 15. I did things in that job like help field interview requests, compile data for press kits, and respond to mail from voters, who, of course, had no idea they were corresponding with a high school sophomore. So I related well to a play that's getting its world premiere in the North Country. This Is Government is the story of what happens when 2 congressional interns and a low-level staffer are the main sources of contact between constituents and the person they elected. We'll talk with a playwright on this episode of Northwards from the studios of NCPR. This is Northwards, the monthly interview show coming to you from NCPR. I'm Mitch Tyke. Members of Congress are sometimes criticized for not being more regularly in touch with and accountable to their constituents. In many districts, the concept of the physical town hall has become kind of a distant memory. Of course, even if they wanted to, members of both the House and the Senate get far more phone calls and letters than they could ever hope to respond to personally. And so often, the job of fielding constituent contacts falls to the lowest people in the congressional staff pecking order, the interns. It was the experience of a Capitol Hill internship that inspired playwright Nina Kissinger to write her new stage play, This Is Government. Like her characters, Kissinger spent a summer getting to know the regular callers to the congressional office where she worked, some called numerous times a day, hoping to speak to their representative. Ahead of its world premiere at Pendragon Theater and an off-Broadway run in New York City, I had a chance to sit down with Nina Kissinger on a beautiful sunny morning outside Pendragon to learn more about what inspired the play. Thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Let me ask a weird question to get us started. Why is this called This is Government and not This is Politics?
That's such a great question. I think of this play a lot as really an examination of how government functions versus how we think it does. This play is really based around interns answering phone calls in a congressional office, truly not the figureheads. Political party names are not used in this play. It's really about the literal functioning of government, of a system that we all rely on, and increasingly, I think now, realize the ways in which it informs so much of our life, including public radio. Yeah, but that's why.
Well, and these interns, it's two interns and a staffer who supervises the interns, but they're kind of cogs in the system.
100%. And I think so much of what I was thinking, I mean, while I interned on the Hill, A, but B, in writing this play is like the people who are servicing us so much of the time in government that we interface with are, the lowest level staffers. And often, when they're interacting with the public, it's at our worst moments, our lowest moments when we need help from the government. And I think thinking a lot about the people who are the figureheads of helping us of progress, of making change versus the people who actually are doing that work on the ground.
Well, and one of the things that occurred to me as I was reading the play is how it will be received in a place like Saranac Lake versus how it would be received in a place like Washington, D.C.
100%. It's a curiosity I have myself for sure. It's been interesting. The play's been workshopped and read a handful of times around the country, and it's always interesting to hear what different audiences laugh at in particular, but also what resonates everywhere. I think, though, at its core, though I think in DC, obviously the resonance would be different for obvious reasons, I think across the country, people feel such a sense of it just exhaustion and disengagement, and I think this play is hopefully energizing in a different way and commenting on what we're all thinking about, but hopefully in a way that doesn't feel just like a collusion with non-productive conversation. Yeah.
Well, what was the catalyst for writing it?
So I interned on the Hill in summer of 2021, and it was a really interesting time to be on the Hill. It was a couple months after January 6th. The fences were still up around the Capitol. And COVID was still, not that it isn't now, but alive and well in terms of you could really tell political affiliation by whether someone was wearing a mask or not. And I was, many times in my internship there were lockdowns, and
And by lockdowns, we're not talking about COVID lockdowns here.
No, that's a great clarification. No, different kinds of security alerts that would place us all in the office for a while. And most of my job while I was an intern was answering constituent calls. And many of the callers we had called many times a day, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And, I was really struck by the sense of familiarity and the care I had for the people who called. I'd recognize their number, pop up on the phone and go, oh my gosh, and then answer the phone. Also, while I was there, one of these lockdowns, and you might remember this, there was a big story in summer of 21, a white pickup truck pulled up outside the Capitol threatening to have a bomb, and the driver saying he wanted to speak to President Biden at the time. And I was really struck by the fact that many of the beliefs he was espousing were things that I heard from people on the phone all day and people I felt a great sense of care of. And kind of out of just thinking about all of this play was really born.
It is so interesting to think that while the people who are elected to represent these people, their constituents, the people that the constituents have the most contact with are generally 20-something interns.
Yes, and many times in my internship, I was struck by kind of the cruel irony of the fact that, we spoke to people in their lowest moments. A family member was being deported. They were being evicted. They had lost their health care. And the person on the other end of the phone was a 20-year-old with no life experience, sitting in an office where they know this is going into report. And not to say, the district staffs for these congressional offices do incredible work for their constituents, but it really struck me often, this can't be doing what it's meant to be doing. The fact that we're on the other end of these calls, where sometimes the most you could do is just stay on the phone with the person. There's just such an incredible injustice in the sense of, if you have the sense that government is meant to help the people it serves, that certainly didn't feel like the case.
Do you feel like you walked into the internship and then walked out with a different view of how things work?
100%. It was a great way for me to learn I didn't want to work in politics, which I'm sure is not the goal of the internship program on the Hill. But I did. It gave me such a different sense also of local politics and public radio and the reasons that local systems are so important. And this great sense of, I think, when you have these really idealistic notions, which I think is wonderful, that I certainly feel, and I think young people have generally, of any generation in any era, that, there's an altruistic sense of purpose, really getting inside, and not to say that people don't believe in that and don't want that, but when, you are a part of a system as a whole, and a system that doesn't always or often does not serve the best interests of its people in a lot of different ways and for a lot of different reasons, including political decision making that has ramifications for people that they didn't expect and didn't necessarily vote for.
We should give people kind of a thumbnail sketch for what this play is about, and I feel like we actually kind of have, but really the play involves two interns and a supervisor who are in lockdown in their congressman's office, and the congressman is at the center of some controversy.
Indeed, yeah. So the congressman is actually loosely a little bit based on Senator Joe Manchin, if you could tell, former Senator Joe Manchin.
I was wondering if it was Joe Manchin or Susan Collins.
Totally. Honestly, it could be either. But it's very much exactly as you said. These two interns and a staffer trapped in their office during the lockdown while the congressman is off voting on the Saving the Health of Americans Today Act, colloquially called the SHAT Act in the play, which unfortunately I wrote long before the big beautiful bill and all of that was happening. But voting on a big healthcare bill that reopen rural hospitals and protect healthcare for folks on, essentially Medicaid in the play. But the congressman has long been known in this play as a moderate who likes to make a big show of it, who does things for political reasons. But it really is about sort of the mystery that unfolds of this lockdown as the interns sort of discover why this is happening and what they can do about it and what their connection may be to it.
Yeah, we don't want to give away any spoilers because hopefully folks will come and see the play. But there is a person who is part of this play who, like the people you were describing, calls multiple times a day and kind of develops a relationship with the people on the, I forget exactly how she terms them, but the folks on the phone.
Yes, and that was the thing that struck me most leaving my internship was that, so much, I talked to our regular callers more than my friends or family that summer, and in the days, weeks, months, frankly, the years after this internship ended, I would find myself walking around wondering, like, how is this person doing? Did that ever work itself out? Because you really did gain a sense of care, and even though, as interns, you stick to a script, and your job is to get people off the phone, really, there was also, people would recognize you from your voice on the phone. And there was just kind of this bond that at least for sure I experienced in that sense of care. And what happens when that sense of care you experience for someone who often is maybe calling your office because they vehemently disagree with your politics or the politics of a rep you're working for, what does that mean in practice?
And in the case of the woman in the play, she does make a distinction between the people on the phone and the person that she's trying to reach.
Yes, it was really interesting. I hate to, get into like real cliches about like partisanship and divisiveness, but it was really fascinating because I would say the way I was treated on the phone by many of these callers versus the way they'd speak about the rep or about, particular political positions was quite different. And I think there is something too, like when we lose the humanity behind a lot of beliefs and we lose the vision of just personhood, and that we, I think it can be challenging to say like we have more in common than not, but I do think there's this sense of, when we really forget that at the end of the day, it's like these are all people who have beliefs and reasons and stakes and everything. And it was a good reminder always of, I think for myself of reconciling how can I have such care for a person whose political beliefs I really abhor potentially, particularly, when I'm from San Francisco, I'm from the biggest liberal there is, and I love it there. But it was a really, I think, interesting confrontation for me to do with myself of how much do I understand people based on their political beliefs, and is that legitimate? Can we ascribe morality to political belief in this kind of ecosystem that is so polarizing?
And can you disagree with a person's political beliefs but still care if they got a good night's sleep?
Exactly, which I think, and I think actually something I really identify with my generation is this sense of to condone or accept or agree to disagree is to condone belief. And I wonder about that. I don't have an answer to that, but I think a lot about, if I really don't agree with someone, is engaging with them as a person, as a kind person in the world, hopefully, with one another, is that to condone a belief that has nothing to do with the interactions we are having? And I think, unfortunately, so much of what we're thinking right now is like, if I don't agree with someone, I cannot engage with them. And, maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, I don't know, but it's something I'm spending a lot of time thinking about, I think, as a young person. Yeah.
It was interesting for me to think about the fact that I don't know exactly when you wrote this play, but how much different things must already seem today versus when you were putting metaphorical pen to paper.
Yeah, I perhaps in a great sense of optimism, when I was writing the play but largely in 2022, I was like, I bet this is going to age out of relevance so fast. Fortunately, I guess for the play it hasn't, but unfortunately for our world, it's become more and more timely. It's been, the play really at its core is about healthcare and a healthcare bill. It's been really interesting to think about this play in light of the big, beautiful bill getting passed and, 12 million people likely losing their healthcare in a couple years. And sort of the broader context and conversation we're having around healthcare in America, also, the Luigi of it all, as I say, and otherwise. But no, it's been really fascinating to see how the play has changed and how, readings of it, audiences have responded to it differently as the political context has shifted over the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, I mean, its first showings in front of the, first complete productions will be in a place where rural healthcare is a real issue.
100%, which also, I mean, I've been so fortunate and so lucky for this entire opportunity and to be in a town like this, which Saranac is so beautiful and welcoming and has been just the most incredible place to get to rehearse a play, obviously. But I think there's something really important and special that we talked a lot about in early rehearsals of the resonance that parts of this play will have here that won't necessarily be in New York and vice versa. But I think also, especially rural healthcare, it's not unlike public radio that serves rural communities. But I think we forget, especially perhaps in cities, that, the things that are getting passed right now affect people's daily life. It's not just if you lose your health care, right? It's if the rural hospital near you can no longer operate because its funding margins are gone. I mean, these are really substantive issues that impact everyone, even if you don't think they might impact you.
One of the things that really hit me as I was reading this was that commonality with public radio. Just to bend your ear for a second, I in the wake of the public radio funding loss, the elimination of funding for the CPB, I did an interview with Scott Simon on Weekend Edition, which was its own kind of strange out-of-body experience for me, having listened to him for 40 years or whatever. And in the wake, but it's that interview itself wasn't the point. The point was after that interview aired around the country, I got a bunch of letters from various people who, essentially said, "How could I be surprised that NPR was being targeted because of X, Y, and Z?" And I wrote back to every single one of those people, and every single one of those people wrote to me to say how surprised they were that I took the time to read their email and write back to them. And it felt a lot like the interaction that your character has regularly with interns, and it struck me that the people that wrote probably expected that there would be somebody who was far distant from me who would read their email and either not do anything with it or respond in a cursory way. And I guess I don't even know where this question is going, but it struck a kind of big general nerve maybe that one of the things that might be missing from where we are today in society is an ability to just hear each other.
100%. No, that's so interesting to think about also from the perspective of, because also as a longtime Scott Simon listener, which how cool is that? But we think, I think, in also national terms of like that everything happens at the national level. And then we have very little expectations, even though the most important services any of us engage with are local, right? And like local journalism, local healthcare, all that stuff happening at the local level. And I do think people have a fundamental shock. I mean, I felt kind of shocked working the phones at this internship of like, oh yeah, there are people actually in this office even who do talk to people all day. Because I think we've come to expect also such a level of that, like anyone who disagrees with us will not engage with us, or certainly won't engage in a kind way. And I think, unfortunately, that's often true in settings that are amplified, the settings we see on the news, what our algorithms show us. But I do think, it's been really interesting, particularly with this play. Many people of different political affiliations have come, and I've had incredible interactions with people talking about the play, talking about kind of the state of the world. And I do think there is a lot that binds us around real moral concern and mutual concern over the moment we're in. And I do think, especially I do identify as a part of Gen Z in this play. I feel, is representative of that perspective in a lot of ways. But I think with Gen Z in particular, a generation that really came up in a time of political divisiveness that we're not responsible for, but are really important to the repair of. I worry even more about, the sort of social media effect of it all, and the like polarity and the effect of kind of like, no, I just won't engage with another perspective, or I can be in my silo and have my community in my silo. And, I think that can be amazing. And I also think, we're not reaping the benefits of what it means to engage with each other and identify as a community of humans first and foremost, as kind of cliche as I think that can sound.
So as the playwright, and you said you've had some staged readings in places, but this will be the first time that it's performed. What is it like to see the thing that you wrote come alive in kind of a 3D way?
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy on so many levels. It's crazy, especially in the sense of, the theater I'm doing right now in New York, beyond when I've been super lucky to have this play workshop at other theaters, but again, not in a production sense, is scrappy. We're figuring out a table here or whatever, folding whatever there. So, I mean, frankly, even walking in and just seeing the set, like a built set, I was like freaking out, texting everyone I know, like, look at this, it's crazy. But, so there's like certainly just a surreal aspect of seeing it quite literally just materialized and seeing, what an incredible theater like Pendragon and New Light collectively are able to do to bring a play to life has been so surreal and amazing just from like a research perspective. But then also I think it's so incredible to see these characters and this world and this story, what a production brings to a play is so incredible. Like no stage reading, nothing can capture to that extent when you have, the change of sneakers under the desk because they're in their work shoes and they walk, that kind of attention to detail in a world deepens the story, allows so much more character work to happen when you have, just the most incredible actors connecting with each other, bringing all this comedy and wonder just to this world. It's really incredible because truly, I mean, I'm very proud of any of the readings that have been done of this play, but there's nothing like truly the world on a page getting put into motion. And I think it's true for most playwrights, or I think most great playwrights, but that you write so you can collaborate, you don't collaborate so you can write. So all of the writing is all in favor of hopefully getting to the room where all these brilliant artists bring all these brilliant ideas to make your play, your world that you've created actually real and actually vivid. And so that's been like the greatest gift, but it's very surreal. And I continuously am like, none of this, because we're sort of in the most beautiful place in the world. So I'm just sort of walking around like, it's just a dream. Like it's been incredible.
Do you have to feel comfortable enough to kind of give away some of your artistic freedom to the director? I mean, is there a point where you have to say, okay, I've set these characters in motion and now you have to interpret them for me?
100%. And that's been such an interesting part of this process is, so much of theater is collaboration and is everybody kind of bringing different ideas and perspectives. And, it's really interesting what people read in your work is not always what you read in your work, which is like a crazy thing because also we all want to be like, no, I would know if that was there, right? But it's, I think it's that whole process of kind of giving over control is, I mean, A, incredible by the fact of a play actually getting to live the way a play is meant to live, but B, when you're working with really incredible collaborators, which is certainly the case here, that you know have incredible trust and an excitement for, and you just watch as people, you know, explode your work in a way where you're like, oh my God, I wish I'd thought of that. I wish I'd thought of that, and I'm so glad somebody else did.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Can Gen Z save the world?
Oh my God, I hope so. I don't know. I can't, but like, I hope collectively some of us could. I don't know. I think so much of Gen Z is, which also I think every generation feels this way. It was interesting. This play was read at this amazing theater, the B Street Theater in Sacramento. And the audience was, I mean, certainly, there were like 200 people in the audience. Everyone was over the age of, I would say, 65. And it was one of the best audiences ever. I mean, it was incredible. And I was struck by how many people said, this is just like me. Like, I see myself in this at, 20, 21. And so I think so much, because in such a, self-centered Gen Z way, of course, but like identify the generation as, the young people can save the world, and everyone's like, you guys will do it, don't worry. And I think it's so interesting, actually, how resonant that is with so many age groups to these early years. But I do think I'm really excited by certain things. I think we just had the mayoral primary in New York, and that was a very exciting, I think, turn of the tides in some way of seeing Gen Z engagement and what young people are excited about. And I do love, I think, Gen Z, for better for worse, is shaking some things up and sort of showing up in spaces differently. Like we're wearing sneakers to work, I don't know, doing some other things. And I am really excited about kind of the potential. That being said, I think, with Gen Z, there can be a disconnect of engagement just because we're, it's an online generation. And what is the gap between that kind of activism versus real on the ground engagement, the kind of local work that's in radio or in healthcare, all that kind of stuff that we need. And so I do have a lot of excitement and hope for kind of a Gen Z view of the world. And I'm excited in a lot of this play is about, okay, and how do we take that idealism or in that excitement and that optimism about what we can become and put it into practice on the ground. That's something I'm thinking a lot about in my own life right now too.
As a Gen Xer, I feel like my generation is at the point where we're just sighing heavily about everything. So I'm grateful for Gen Z.
Yeah, you guys. I think it's the sighing era has entered, and I think that's earned. Yeah.
Nina Kissinger, thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Nina Kissinger is a playwright who lives in New York City. Her play, This Is Government, closes Pendragon Theater's 2025 season, and then it moves to Off-Broadway. It's Northwards, coming to you from North Country Public Radio. I'm Mitch Tyke. The first adjective on singer-songwriter Vitalia Khmyl's biography is Ukrainian-Canadian. But the Montreal-based pop singer who performs simply as Vitalia is truly hard to define with a single term. She recently graduated from Concordia University with a bachelor's degree in jazz vocal performance, and that squares with most of the songs she recorded and released a few years ago. Jazz-tinged pop songs, or maybe even pop-tinged jazz songs. But there is definitely a different vibe on the EP she released earlier this year called Alone in a Crowd. The EP includes 2 versions of a song called Molly that's won her fans and gained some traction on Canadian radio. And while the songs are personal to Vitalia, her hope is that listeners will take their own messages from them. Vitalia joined us on the line from her home studio. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate the time.
So you lead your biography by describing yourself as a Ukrainian Canadian. How has your Ukrainian heritage shaped your life?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think that where we are born and where our cultural background kind of comes from does shape our environment and who we kind of become. For me particularly, I think that I became a singer in the first place because in the Ukrainian community here in Montreal, we are people who like to sing a lot in community. So I went to Ukrainian school. I went to kind of like these other Ukrainian extracurriculars, and I ended up singing every single Saturday. And I was like, okay, well, what is this? Like, why am I having so much fun? Like, it's such a communal event. And I would go to camp, and we would also like learn Ukrainian traditional folk songs. And it just became like this thing that really, I don't know, ignited this flame inside me. So I just carried on throughout my childhood singing. I even got to sing at the Ukrainian festival in Montreal here every year for a couple of years when I was a kid. And that kind of ignited the flame for me. I was like, okay, I love being on stage. I love singing. I love music. I love the fact that I get to harmonize with my friend because we were kind of had like this duet going on. And that's kind of how it all started. And when I think of other Ukrainian elements that influenced me, for sure, the Ukrainian patriotism that I've kind of been instaured with has led me through my life to have certain values and standards. And I do feel like Ukrainians are go-getters. Like we fight for what we want. And in this career especially, it is a career that's pretty hard. Hard in the sense that you have to fight for what you want, you have to keep going, and you have to, you have to accept the fact that the only way that you won't make it through something is if you yourself stop fighting. So I kind of feel like that's something that's always been a part of it because part of our Ukrainian history is also rooted in the fact that we've always had to fight for independence.
Well, right. I mean, there's fighting for what you want to do, and then there's literally fighting. And, you sort of flash forward, I don't know, 15, 20 years from when you were a little girl singing at these festivals, and you're making your way as a musician, and then suddenly being Ukrainian, it doesn't necessarily mean something else to you, but it means something else to the rest of the world around you.
100%. Yeah, and I think that it's very important to kind of highlight the fact that this is still happening. The war hasn't stopped, but the only difference is that it's easy for people in the world that don't necessarily know this situation firsthand to say, why don't you guys just like stop fighting? Why can't you stop the war? And it's like, well, unfortunately, Ukrainians can't just stop fighting because we're defending ourselves. So we're defending ourselves from somebody who does have the power to stop. And we need to spread that message around. And I think that that's kind of, yeah, that's what we're here to do. So it does mean something different to the world, but hopefully we can create this bridge across all these things so that we know more about Ukrainians and we know that the war is still happening and that there's still a lot of things that we can do.
You actually wrote and recorded a song a couple of years ago in support of what Ukraine has been going through.
Yes. Yeah, I actually wrote it exactly when the war was kind of starting, and I released it a year after that because I wasn't even sure I had the guts to kind of put it out because it was so vulnerable, and I knew that it wasn't the artistic direction I wanted to go with as an artist, and I was just starting out. So I was scared that it would kind of taint the way that people would perceive me because I am Ukrainian. It is part of my identity. And I think that I published it and I was like, no, I really need to get this out. I feel like it was kind of therapeutic in a way as well to kind of release it and have it out for others to listen to.
Sky of blue, I'm morning to release me from my pain. Light my soul, I'll sing away my sorrows till I'm broken, scarred and healed again. I long for you from afar.
A song can mean so many different things and people can interpret it the way that they want. So I hope that some people do the research about like the poetry that's in there in regards to the visual thing that I kind of mentioned. Like, I mentioned the sky that's blue, the wheat that's yellow, kind of the colors of our flag, but also the Ukrainian, like one of the Ukrainian armies that we had in the past's flags that's red and black. So yeah, I just hope that people go listen to that song and kind of do their research in regards to all that imagery.
Well, and it does sound a lot different than just about everything else that I've heard that you've recorded. It's also probably a good segue to how your musical career has evolved. So Land of Black was kind of an outlier, but your singles that you were recording around that time were tinged a little bit, maybe a lot by jazz. Was that the direction you were originally thinking your career would go in?
So I do have jazz training. I did just graduate from Concordia probably a month ago now.
Oh, congratulations.
I submitted my last assignment. Thank you. And so I definitely got into music thinking, okay, I don't know what I'm kind of doing, like when I got into music school, I was like, let's see where this kind of takes me. So I started off with doing a year in classical, which technically, like I'm learning classical theory, but I had a teacher that was teaching me jazz. And I just realized how much I loved jazz through that, switched over and did my whole bachelor's in jazz after all. So I am jazz trained, but I do have to admit that I've always have had this soft spot for pop. Like even as a kid, I was like, oh my God, pop is just so it's there. People connect to it easily. It has a message to spread, and like there's all different kinds of pops. Like there is that cheesy kind, and sometimes we have to give into that guilty pleasure and listen to some of that. But I just figured I had something calling me towards pop, so I figured, okay, I do love jazz. I'm trained in this, so how do I kind of incorporate both these things to go together?
It's been a while since I've seen your face. Makes me wonder if you were ever worth the chase. I don't even think about you no more. Since you decided to walk out that door. I used to care about you. Now I'm living life without you. Can't believe it's true. I just saw you on the news, and I thought to myself, I'm so glad I'm over.
Are there jazz musicians out there that have especially inspired you over the years?
One of my go-tos, I think it's, a classic. Listening to Ella Fitzgerald always gets me going because she just has this like I don't care vibe, this energy when you listen to like the live recordings. She forgets the lyrics and she just keeps on inventing lyrics on the spot. So not only does she improvise melodies and like the rhythm and everything is super precise, but then she also invents lyrics on the spot. So that I find insane. Sarah Vaughan has incredible paraphrasings. And Veronica Swift, one that's kind of active right now, I absolutely love her. Veronica Swift has amazing interpretations of every single song. I think she's been kind of at it since she was a kid as well, but like she's been into jazz her whole life, so it's definitely a different ball game too. It's like one of those people that you're like, wow, how do you get to that level? Like it's inspiring, but it's also like scary, like, damn, like who. Anyway, so she's one of those people that's, going at it right now and that I find amazing. Yeah.
Just another 10,000 or 20,000 hours of work.
Exactly.
Your EP that just recently came out, definitely much more in the pop realm. You wound up on my radar because I heard your song Molly on one of the CBC stations that we can hear on this side of the border when I occasionally turn off my own radio station. When you put together a collection of songs, especially when it is your first EP, do you have a sense that one song will be the one that gets the attention?
You know what? I didn't think that there would be one song in particular that necessarily would. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I do think that you get a certain intuitive feeling about specific songs. For me, Molly was written in such a quick way. It was so quick, it was so intuitive the way that I even wrote it. Like I wrote it in, I think, an hour. And it was like in one sitting, it just like really flowed. And I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. Met up with the producer, this, that. Knew what I wanted for the vision. I had like specific ideas and I was like, okay, I want guitars here, like kind of coming in. That's kind of the lead. I want a kick bass, like kick drum, sorry. That's there the whole time.
You ignored the messages I sent. You never explained what you meant. You never even paid for rent, but you had me with your little accent.
Anyway, so I had like specific ideas for this song. Then somehow I ended up talking to some directors that told me, oh yeah, like out of all the songs that you have, this is the one that I want to direct a music video for. So it kind of just ended up happening and evolving naturally throughout the course that this was always a song that flowed very naturally, very easily, which is why I think a lot of people gravitated towards it too. Like you can feel that energy. You don't know why, but you can feel that it's something that was very intuitive, very flowy. And I think that having a visual music video also helps.
You until I'm high. You ignored the messages I sent. You never explained what you meant. You never even paid for it, but you had me with your little accent. 'Cause
I did have a feeling that it was very poppy. Like, it is the most pop-based song that I have. It has a lot of rhymes in there, and it does have a very clear story going from A to B. Personally, when I was writing all these songs, like, I was in different periods of my life as well sometimes, and I just remember Molly being that clear and precise. But I really love Insecure as well. Like, I have a lot of love for all my songs for different reasons, but I feel like I thought that Insecure was going to be the one that people would really love, and it's just because I got it produced a little bit later. It was one of the last songs that was produced out of the EP, and I felt like I had explored a little bit of myself in different ways in every single song, and that at the time of Insecure, I was like, why don't we go crazy? Like, I wanna feel like I'm in that, in my head, and with those thoughts of like being insecure, and I want to feel like I'm going crazy.
But I can't help but feel that you'd want to down her with gin. We break up and make up and then pretend it's meant to be. Yeah, it must be. We blow up and hang up and then I cry. Why don't you go and see? I'm the only one standing in your way. Please let me be released from this pain. I hate that I want you to break things off with me. I'm just too insecure. Oh, am I just too insecure? Too insecure.
I wanted it to feel kind of Lady Gaga-esque, you know, theatrical and very like, it's the end of the world and kind of dramatic. So I really had a feeling that Insecure would be something that the song that everybody gravitated towards. But I think it's just one of my favorites because I gave myself permission to explore that part of myself.
It's meant to be, yeah, it must be. We hook up and give up and then I scream. Why don't you go?
How much are you writing for yourself when you put together your songs, and how much are you thinking about the people you hope will connect with what you're writing about?
I think that when I'm in the songwriting process, I don't limit myself. I'm not in the mood to, I'm not in the zone to be thinking of, okay, what are people going to think about this? What is this? That's more of like the post-production process for me. Like, I produce things, I want it to have a certain effect. Like, I think that, as I mentioned with Insecure, I did want it to feel like it was kind of overwhelming, that it was like scary. There was this energy about it that's kind of haunting. But that was more in the production process that I was thinking about that. And when I'm writing, I genuinely think that if I'm authentic to myself and write about my experiences or other people's experiences sometimes, because I do write about, you know, kind of like these situations that make me think, anything that makes me think. So be it kind of therapy in the moment, like especially that EP, the way that I wrote those songs was very much like, let me sit down at the piano, see what happens. And it was always when something was happening in my life that I just like needed therapy. And I was like, okay, well, it's gonna flow through a song. So that's kind of how it happened for me with those songs. But generally speaking, I think that the songs that I write right now, at least, are kind of just like, I'll sit down. Sometimes it'll be something about, you know, that therapy that I mentioned, or sometimes it'll be something more like, okay, I witnessed this actual situation in my life. Like, I often write little lines lately. So I might be sitting on the subway and I'll see someone, another homeless person on the metro. Like, for example, like, I think there's so many issues societally that we kind of can address as a singer songwriter. You know, like, those things make me think, like, why have we let society come to this point where it's okay to outcast these people? I don't know. There's so many like different issues at hand in general in society. So I think it's like a therapeutic outlet, not only for my love problems, like in this particular EP was, but I think generally speaking, to kind of let out everything that I think about the world. So obviously I do have my own bias, my own lens of all the things that I see that are wrong with the world. And I decide to write about those. But, you know, sometimes it's just like a little conversation spark with a friend who tells me about the shitty thing that somebody did. Or I don't know, I'm just thinking about negative stuff because I think that it's easier to write about the negative stuff to a certain extent. But yeah.
Well, and interesting that you think about writing songs as therapeutic, because a lot of us listen to songs for the same reason.
I think that that's what's important for a musician to do, you know, like we are the people that are kind of connected enough to be like, okay, what am I feeling right now? And you kind of put it out there, and we don't know how people will interpret it, but that's also part of the fun. You don't know how people will interpret it, but you hope that they'll create their own memories, their own stories from it too. Because I've been in situations where like I performed at a show and somebody comes up to me after like, did you write this like for me? Because I feel like every single word of that song was like directly related to like this one particular thing that I've gone through in my life. So it's like either it can go to that extent and really reach someone in that powerful way. Or maybe it's just like that song that people love listening to when they're on a road trip. Or like, I like the idea that my songs can be a soundtrack to people's lives, you know?
Well,
So it can be either therapeutic and actually have an impact heads on, like actually affect people, or just kind of be a background thing. But still, you're creating memories to it. You're listening to it in this specific period of your life, and you'll be like, hey, yeah, what 2025, that was the year that I achieved this, this, this. And you kind of like correlate and visualize those songs as the thing that kind of sparked those moments in your life.
well, and amazing to think that you're having this effect on people, and it starts with you alone on the subway or alone at your piano, and like the stuff coming through you, and then ends up touching people in all these myriad of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of crazy. But I love it. I love it. I love what I do.
Did I see? Are you also a vocal coach for young singers?
Yeah, I have a couple of students right now. One of them is a friend, like both of them are friends actually. So it's been fun to kind of go through that process as well. Kind of, yeah, I think I've learned enough in jazz school that I'm able to kind of give some advice now. And it's been a fun journey. It's really rewarding to see people grow and realize, okay, yeah, like I can do this too. It's not just for somebody who's a singer. Like anybody can sing. It's just about the training that you have. So if anyone's hesitating or is listening to this and like, oh, well, I can't sing at all, like I have such a bad voice. No, it's always trainable. There's always a way to train your voice. So if you want to do it, go for it.
Well, I was going to ask about this because you have lived your whole life with many people probably coaching you along the way, and you have probably learned what you like about some teachers and what you don't like about some teachers. And I would imagine that shapes how you work with the students you have.
100%. I think that the way that I work with my students is very based on, okay, first of all, what are your goals? Like I think that any teacher should be able to ask those questions of like, what are your goals? Like if it's not the same thing as if you're training to do an audition for like a vocal competition versus you're just learning to use your body the right way to sing versus you're just doing it for fun. Like there's so many different reasons why people can start singing. And one of my students actually is did it because she said that she didn't project enough in life. She's like, yeah, no, I'm like at a bar and like the person that I'm with can't hear me. So it's as simple as that. But it comes from a place of like, okay, well, she wants to develop this skill that can help her in different aspects of life. But then it's like, how do I make it fun? Like I think that's something that I've learned from different teachers is like, okay, well, I want to be having fun because if there's so much pressure, I'm not actually going to be performing well. Like when you're stressed, when you're anxious, your body can feel it and you're not going to be performing as well. But it's also managing that as well. So I am trying to make my students comfortable throughout the experience because it is very uncomfortable to be singing and doing these vocal exercises where you have to open up your mouth really wide and you're like, oh, like I'm not used to doing that. Like it's even like I think that singing in general is a very vulnerable thing just because sometimes it shows people the transparency of who you are to a certain extent. I don't know how to explain this otherwise, but when you do vocal exercises and you have a voice crack, it's just something that's very, very intertwined with who you are, I think. It's very interconnected. Like if you think that you're gonna sing well, you're gonna sing well. It's very connected to psychology. If you think that you're a bad singer, then you're not gonna sing as well. That's 100% sure. So I feel like I'm trying to instill this confidence in my students more than anything, first and foremost, because that's what kind of leads you to do the stuff that's fun and kind of sing better in the first place.
Well, and in your case, I mean, you're singing, so you have that level of vulnerability, but you're also singing the songs that you wrote, and the stuff that you write about is often about like the vulnerable parts of who you are. I don't know if that was a question, but
I mean, it does make sense. I do think that it takes a certain type of personality to be on stage to a certain extent because you have to be very comfortable with yourself. You have to be okay with people seeing you a certain way, even though it's not the way that you see yourself. So that's a big thing too. It's like I'm trying to be as authentic as I can be in every context of life, but at the same time, like if I say something and people have this other view of life and have their own lenses, they might think that I tried to insult them, or they might think that I tried to do something that's kind of like see something in a negative light, even though my intention wasn't necessarily negative. So it's okay with it's living within the discomfort, or like being comfortable within the discomfort, I think is one of like my mottos in life, and kind of being comfortable with the fact that, yeah, people might not always understand you, might not always see everything the way that you see it, and that's okay. And it's kind of just like, hopefully, as I said, to kind of bring it back to what I was saying earlier, I put the songs out, and then it's like it's other people's job to kind of interpret it. So I like the feeling of having other people connect to it in their own various ways. And if people can, sometimes people have come up to me like, oh yeah, so what's Molly about, or what's Insecure about, and that stuff. And I'm like, I have my own reasons for writing it, but you tell me what it means to you, you know? Like I feel like that's more interesting because you're your own person and everybody gets connected in a different way.
How far ahead are you thinking about your career? I mean, because it's like being a writer. You finish writing the book, you go through the editing process, it goes to the publisher. It takes a while. By the time people are reading the book that you've written, I say this as though I'm a published author, which I am not. By the time people are reading what you've written, you wrote it 2 or 3 years ago sometimes, and the songwriting process works the same way. So how far ahead is Vitalia thinking about her career?
That's a very good question, because I do feel like a lot of singer-songwriters might feel like by the time they actually release the songs that they've been working on for the last couple of years, they're like, well, that's not me anymore. I'm not that person anymore, which is always really funny because you're like, okay, how do you kind of stay within the flow of, I still have to do promotion on this song, even though I don't necessarily connect to the Vitalia that I was 2, 3 years ago necessarily.
I'm not insecure anymore.
Exactly. So there's so many different things about that I've been thinking about. I am thinking about my career in a very long-term way. Like right now, I'm planning on releasing these house pop songs, which are completely different from this EP, but they're kind of so I feel like the last EP was like my sad girl pop era, and now it's going to be like my hot girl summer era as well. So in that same sense, kind of just like talking about subjects like sexuality, but also bringing them in a light that's very, like, I'm not ashamed of this. Women shouldn't be ashamed for their sexuality. We, like, not just women, just anybody, but it's more like, it's about bringing some fun. I did the sad girl thing, and now I'm like, no, I want to have fun. That is a different facet of me. I know how to have fun. I am a fun person, I think. I do have moments where I'm insecure, that's for sure. But that's why I wrote kind of like an EP that kind of showed that darker side of me to a certain extent, or like the traumas, the negative stuff. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, this is a little bit more simple, straight to the point, having fun. So that's an EP that I'm planning on releasing kind of like staggering all of this year, a little bit of next year probably, because I'm trying to release them single by single before I release a whole EP. So I don't have like an actual date for the next EP just yet. But single by single. And for 2026, I'm thinking of a rock EP as well.
Makeup is running off your face. Tell me, are you worth the chase? Left me, but
Well, it will be fun to watch, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk again. Vitalia, thank you so much. It was really fun getting to know you, and best of luck with everything that comes next.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Thank you for having me.
you never even paid for rent, but you had me with your little accent. 'Cause my
Vitalia's latest EP is called Alone in a Crowd. You can find much more about the Ukrainian-Canadian musician from links at ncpr.org/northwards. Thanks so much for joining us for this month's edition of the program. Digital oversight of the show comes from Ethan Shanty and Bill Hanel. Caitlin Kelly does our social media. Our theme music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. And I'm Mitch Teich, your host and producer. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Northwards podcast and get new interviews delivered to you
you every week on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or your other off-brand podcast distributor of choice. Find out more about the show at ncpr.org/northwards. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join us again soon for another edition of Northwards from North Country Public Radio.